fair.
Right, Doom Prophecy,
Yes.
episode 2.
I feel like it was an improvement from episode 1.
Yeah.
It still has a bit of... It's not so much the pace. I think what it is, sort of what we touched on last week, of like, it is just a different vibe, a different pace to the films. And that's not a bad thing. It's just still kind of feels like a weird adjustment.
This show makes me feel very Zoomer.
Oh, because you're struggling to concentrate.
No, not so
No?
much that. So you know how, like, despite technically being Gen Z, I am very much
Yeah,
not Gen Z in basically every aspect of my life.
you like to say so, but...
The a lot of like the meme complaints that people throw at about Zoomers, I genuinely kind of see as valid complaints about this show. Like the big one recently that I have been massively against was like Gen Z say there's too much pointless sex in TV. And I'm like, sex is a valid part of the human experience, taking it out of media would be dumb and pointless.
Yeah.
This feels very much like Game of Thrones back in 2010 and 12 and 13 had lots of sex, and that made it really popular, so we want to do that again. And like, I don't think the scene was completely pointless, where like the prince and the princess are doing it and he spills the
Inside a
information.
massive tree.
Like, yeah, like I get like the logic of that is when you're vulnerable and you're more likely to let something slip. But it was kind of like, oh, we're gonna slip your boob here because we can. They didn't need to do that.
It's
And it's just like, it just feels like it really feels like they've gone, let's do Game of Thrones in space rather than let's do Dune on TV.
I would agree. So I don't know if it's necessarily like, let's do Game of Thrones in space. I think they've gone into this with like the story they want to tell for Dune, and it's like, how can, like, let's approach the Dune universe in a TV aspect. And they're doing this like royal families, political stories, and like the usual medieval royal families fighting for power. And they've, like you said, they have taken what they learned from Game of Thrones, what they saw work in Game of Thrones, what partly helped blow it up into this like cultural show that everyone was watching, because it was like, oh, they're like, don't shy away from nudity and gore and like all this. They're like, oh, royal families and political things, a lot of that happens around sex. This is just the same thing, but it's just sci-fi medieval because it's royal families and stuff again. Oh, let's use those same things in this. They've kind of lent on things that they did in Game of Thrones as storytelling techniques in this. And it's like, straight away I was like, this, I can tell this is a HBO show. Every time I was like, this is a HBO show. Like, this is Game of Thrones. They want this to be Game of Thrones, like we've been saying.
And let me be completely clear. Sex absolutely does have a valid place in this storytelling, because, yeah, this is what it's about. It does feel quite weird when, obviously, Dune has such little sex because of the nature of the world they're on. It's like, there is, like, one sex scene in Dune, and that's supposed to be a big moment because it's like, wow, any kind of sweat or bodily fluids is incredibly important to survival, so you're not going to just waste it.
Yeah.
So I think that makes it like an even more jarring jump from Dune. But again, a lot of what makes Dune feel unique is its unique color palette and its visual style and the lack of dialogue in a lot of ways. Like every word is meaningful.
Yeah.
And where the Batman to the Penguin has kept themes the same, although the cinematography isn't as excellent because it's on a smaller budget, it feels like it knows where it is.
Yeah, it's still
and
totally
trying
fits.
exactly, and the storytelling is consistent. and I know this is based on a different book by a different author 10,000 years ago in the canon on a
Mm.
different planet. That jump is really, really drastic. And I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm saying it's too early for me to tell whether I like. There's a lot of
Yeah.
yapping. There's a lot of yapping.
There
And I'm saying,
is.
like, we released a 3-hour podcast not even 2 weeks ago, and I'm sat here going, there's a lot of yapping.
I know what you mean. I think the tough thing is it's such a contrast to the films in like
Yes.
the vibe of what is going, like the meat of the show is different. The sex scenes is like, I don't think they're overly, like, I can understand why they're done. They have their story place. I think anyone who's watched a lot of Game of Thrones, like me, will have seen it and gone, you're just trying to be Game of Thrones. This is like, because it's almost like, oh, I know I'm watching HBO. This has kind of become their style of show, which it
And don't get me wrong,
hasn't.
HBO
But
for a long time has always been like the American broadcaster that isn't afraid of like showing a bit of partial nudity. Like there's a lot of memes on the internet of like when you were 12 years old and your parents got HBO for the first time. Like there is like a lot of that stuff. That's always been the place where like these mature themes
yeah,
are dealt with, and that's fine. But it just adds. It's not the only. It's not a problem. It just adds to such a drastic flip from the films we've come from.
yeah. I think there is a lot of potential there. Like, there's a very interesting story here of how the families are going to gain their power and
Yeah.
what the first like Messiah guy
Yeah.
is. This who
What's this?
he's leading up to be? Is this what then they are trying to recreate when it comes to Paul? There's like, is this something that started this whole plan of trying to find the next one of these? Yeah, this whole mysterious character who has some weird ass internal combustion.
I need more exposition about how the fuck he's doing what he's doing. Like, if this series ends without us knowing how he's setting people on fire without touching them, I'm gonna lose my mind.
I
Because it also looks like it hurts him a little bit.
So I think it's obviously a concentration thing. Like, it's like a
Obviously, is he rolling D20 to see if he keeps his
I
concentration?
I think it's just a case of like um obviously, like, he has a certain, it takes a certain strength, internal mental strength to do it. On a kid it was easy for him because it's small. Like, on the we didn't see what it was like for him to do it to the Bene Gesserit woman, because
Yes.
we just saw it from her, what happened to her spontaneously combusting. When he did it to the Duke, he obviously was like more so trying to also control it and not just go straight to kill him as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what it was like he was trying to slowly do it. So there was more like focus on what he was doing. But yeah, there's obviously some mental tax to trying to do it. It has to do, it's got something to do with the life water, eternal water, whatever. I forget what that blue.
Yeah. I
Because
assume so, but why can't Paul do that shit? Or can Paul do that shit?
maybe he
Like,
can, but he hasn't figured it out yet.
he hasn't unlocked it yet. He's not got deep enough in his skill tree.
Yeah, he's not leveled up enough. Yeah, we don't like this idea that this soldier was eaten, spat out, and had powers. I like this whole mystery around this prophecy of like when the granddaughter of the high priestess woman did that,
Yeah.
whatever, the awakening they called it, and she's told it's a man born twice, and like explains more about this. I'm like, okay, so this is this soldier guy. He's been born again. He now has those powers, and like they're building up this prophecy that's like some mystery, which then obviously the Bene Gesserit are clearly going to latch onto.
Yes.
Um,
I'm,
I
I'm very
like
curious.
I liked the moment when the main woman used the voice on the soldier guy, and he was taking it out. I was like, oh shit, it's working on him. I'm like, surely he's gonna like, is he gonna show him like start to try to resist it? And then he's holding it at his throat, and when she's like plunging into your throat a second time, I was like, oh, he's faking it. He's fucking with her. And then
He's faking it. I think he
nah,
was like just strong enough to resist it.
I think he was faking it.
Oh, okay. That's an
I
interesting
because he
idea.
knows that like their whole thing is control. I think he was going along with it to make her think that she's, and then he was like doing that to then fake it, and then it's like, you never had any fucking control over me.
I'm also really curious about the House of Atreides. How does your man go from just being a soldier to being one of the great houses?
So,
That I'm curious about how that develops.
well,
Does he
so,
like marry
oh,
up and
you
then
mean the
marry up and then marry
swordsman?
up? Yeah.
So, what we're told in that first episode was it was House Atreides that defeated the AI.
Yeah.
So I think House Atreides must be still a strong house, and his swordsmen, like swordsmen are seen as great swordsmen, so that's why he's in
Oh, so
another
he's been like sent as
sent.
almost like a gift.
Yeah, you're gonna train up.
Oh, okay.
I think it's how I would take that. My
Maybe.
more thought is like, how does House of Atreides go from being a great house to essentially, we know they become like a navy and they're a strong force, but they had to kind of grind their way to that, and then they're betrayed by everyone.
I wonder if it's a little bit of the. So they got a lot of notoriety from ending the war.
Hmm.
And then obviously he's kind of like semi planning to revolt against the Emperor.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that happens and it brings like the new Emperor, which gives them a bit more. And they like maybe over the course of 10,000 years, they're seen as a fast riser. I know
Hmm.
that sounds crazy to us, but if you think about the scale of this
Yeah.
universe, and then the other houses are like, but at the same time, the Harkonnens haven't even really cracked on with much yet. They don't seem to be a big player yet.
I think they're about to, right? Because he is the prince, the king or whatever at the moment, emperor. He is Harkonnen, right? I'm pretty sure.
No.
I thought they
See,
were.
this is what I mean. It's compared to Dune, it's a lot more confusing for no
Yeah,
reason.
because there's so many different names. I think he is because their princess that they were going to train was saying was Harkonnen. No,
There was a
I can't.
Harkonnen at the ball.
The Harkonnen is one of the priestess ladies.
Yes, yeah, no. So the current High Priestess,
Is a Harkonnen.
who is
Yeah.
a Harkonnen.
So I think Harkonnen's got to be something to do with like she gets her bloodline in somehow.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think House Atreides still has this notoriety, but this rebellion thing or whatever is gonna kind of sully their name a little bit, which is why they get pushed down the pecking order, build themselves back up. And I think because of what's happened in the past, like you said, they gain notoriety and they're worried. I think what we saw with Paul was they're basically worried they're going to get too strong and do the same again. So they got rid of him quicker.
Yeah.
But yeah, the political storyline has a lot of potential here.
Oh,
It's
it
just,
really
it is
does.
very like dense feeling compared to like through dialogue and stuff compared to the films, but because they're just such a contrast.
Like, I don't want to say the show's badly written because I don't think it is, but the films do also have a lot of dense political stuff to get through. But it cuts through it like butter in the films, and it's like, okay, cool. You got House Atreides, you got the Harkonnens. House Atreides being forced to take over Arrakis, which should be a high honor, but it doesn't seem like it really is because the Harkonnens are fucking brutal and they don't want to give up and they don't want to
Mm.
lose control over a planet that's worth galactic billions and trillions and quadrillions and shit. Like Also very dense politically, but a lot more digestible. And I don't know
I think that's because
what's kind of gone wrong here.
I think in my opinion, it's like in the films, it's the political information we get is houses versus houses. And yes, there's the like head figures, but we in the show we're getting multiple characters from houses, all each kind of having these different political moves that they make. We're seeing the intricate moves rather than just a house has been promoted to take over planet while other got demoted. Oh, now that house is angry and is going to take it back. We're seeing, oh, this duke is offering ships for this, but also marrying it. It's like we're seeing there's a lot more like overlapping threads of political stories, and I think that makes it feel really dense. And like we're saying, we're getting confused with names and stuff.
Yeah,
It's a lot heavier on the small details, which is then harder to kind of keep up on.
exactly. But I'm not at all saying I'm not enjoying it. But
No, I
it's
think.
still up in the air for me. There's definitely a lot of potential upside to it, and I really hope it manages to release that fully.
Mm,
But I can also see a world where I end up a little bit disappointed at the end of the series if they don't get their ducks in a row properly.
yeah, I think we need to see a big political move or something like exciting in that sense in the next episode or so, and then it like end on like a pretty pivotal
Yes.
push for power from a certain someone or reveal of like who the fuck the soldier is. Like we just it's still a lot of talking about. We need some like big story moment to start happening.
I completely agree.